Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dave Gorin, Executive Director of the National Sports Media Association. I want to thank our sponsor for these Paying It Forward, Paying It Back series, Greater Winston-Salem Inc. They're back there on the fake background. And I'd like to welcome our guest today, Julie DiCaro. Julie, welcome. Glad to have you with us.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All the way from Chicago, or suburban Chicago.
Yeah. People from Chicago will destroy you for saying that if you're not actually in Chicago at the moment you say it.
And we were talking before we started. I was a geography minor, and I'm very particular. I want to know exactly where you're from. Don't tell me you're from the big city when you're from one. I want to know because I'm interested by that.
Yeah.
So, your book is out. Sidelines.
It's out.
How exciting is that for you?
It's exciting. It's also terrifying because I feel like I spilled a lot of tea, and I've sort of been waiting for some of the blowback. But the reception has been really good, and it's a huge relief to have it out and out of my hands.
How long did it take you? What was the process from start to finish?
2 years. 2 years. I mean, I had a year to write it. And of course I waited until the last minute and wrote it all in like the last 3 months. And then as all true writers do. And then, it's a year of the on-ramping of editing and, rounds of editing and coming up with a cover and deciding who's going to blurb and, all those kinds of things. It just, it just took forever. And there was a fair amount of time when I felt like we were just sitting there and I was like, can we just put it out now? Because like all this stuff was happening and everything that happens after it's gone through its last round of edits, you're like, you can't add it. So I'm like, I'm just sitting here. I'd rather like add something to the book, but nope.
Frustrating.
Yeah, it's a little bit frustrating. Yeah, because you don't want something to come out and already be 6 months behind,
So I've ordered the book. I've only, as I said, I've only read the first chapter, which is on Amazon. And you go into the history to start of women. And, I'm 60 years old. So when I was growing up as a kid, most of the girls in my class in elementary school couldn't have cared less about sports. Title IX comes along, and I think that was probably the turning point for interest among younger girls because they had the opportunity to play and experience. You came along probably right at the right time. If you look at that, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely coming after Title IX is huge. I grew up with a mom who was born in 1943, who played in all kinds of sports when she was growing up. She went to sports summer camp, and I always grew up with pictures of her playing volleyball and tennis and, all kinds of things. So I was the first one in my family. I'm the oldest. So my dad immediately had me in like every kind of sport, even after my brothers came along. And, I grew up in a small town and sports were what we did. That was whether you were playing soccer, which our entire town plays soccer, or volleyball, which was another huge sport. I mean, that was where everything social happened in my town. So, for girls and boys, there was really no way to avoid it.
Yet when you decided what you wanted to do for a living and you were really into sports and you're a big Cubs fan, but you didn't see women on TV or maybe read some in the newspaper.
Yeah, I saw Leslie Visser doing all those college basketball games, which I was incredibly jealous of. Melissa Isaacson was covering the Bulls for the Chicago Tribune, which I thought was just insane at the time that there was a woman covering the Bulls. Not insane in a bad way. I just thought she was a complete badass, which she is. But, I went to journalism school. I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. I wanted to do play-by-play for the Chicago Cubs. That's what I wanted to do as a kid and still do, kind of. But it was really difficult when I graduated to see where the path was from journalism school to covering sports. Even if I'd gone to a small town paper, I was still third or fourth off the bench to cover high school sports even. So there was just no real pathway. And I feel like the internet and blogging and, podcasting and being able to upload your own videos on YouTube and social media, all that stuff really is what's allowed women to sort of make their entrance into sports media.
And there's certainly been a big growth in women who are writing for major metropolitan dailies, if those exist anymore. The Athletic, certainly, which is one of the big websites that covers sports and doing very well. And now TV everywhere. I mean, you see women, right here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I believe each of the 3 affiliates who do local news each of them has a woman doing
Mhm.
sports. So especially I think in the last 10 years, we've seen that explosion. Do you feel kind of now that you got in maybe the right time, it's a little late?
I don't know. Yeah, I feel like we should have gotten there much sooner, given that, Melissa Ledke's lawsuit against Major League Baseball was in 1976. It feels like it took us a long time to get there, and we're still really limited in our roles. So you can regurgitate facts, you can report, you can, be on the sidelines, which is one of the toughest jobs out there, and regurgitate what the men tell you. But places where women give their expertise and are asked about their opinions are still kind of few and far between.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel is it growing still, do you think, the number of
It's a good question, because when you take ESPN out of the mix, the number of women in the industry goes down precipitously. In digital and in print media, women are actually leaving the industry. And a lot of it has to do with harassment. A lot of it has to do with glass ceilings. So, I think that, every time we have something happen where we have a big moment or a woman is doing something on a grand stage. So whether it's, Beth Mowins called a Cubs game last week. It's the first time a woman's called a Cubs game ever. I waited my whole life to hear it. We had Kate Scott calling a Warriors game. We had Megan McPeak and Kia Nurse calling a Toronto Raptors game. I mean, that's terrific. But it seems like at this point, women being in the broadcast booth should just be a natural thing. And the fact that we still do all these things for Women's History Month and then that's it, feels like we're not making as much progress as we should.
It needs to be more than a one-off.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned harassment in there. You've had, I guess, a couple of widely publicized deals with that. Where are we with that? Is it, any day you get on Twitter, you want to say, the world's over and it's never going to get better.
Right.
Is that, in your opinion, real life?
Twitter is the worst place on earth. And no, it's not real life, but it is reflective. I mean, it definitely affects your mood. Right. So, I mean, whether or not it's real life, we take it into real life with us. I used to have guys at my station say to me when I was like crying, don't worry about it. It's not real life. And I was like, but it is, because I'm sitting here crying, 5 minutes before I go on the radio. So it is real life. People always want me to say it's getting better. And they always ask me with such hope in their eyes, like, it's getting better, right? And actually, I think it's getting worse. Mm-hmm. I mean, especially with the pandemic, people have been home all year. They're angry. They're looking for someone to be angry at. And Twitter is just such an easy outlet to do that at. You just fire off a tweet at someone and never think about it again. And definitely don't think about how it affects them as a human being. So I don't know. And the last 4 years didn't do anything to help. When you have the president calling people names online all the time and sort of normalizing it. So, I don't think we're in a great place with it.
And I think it gives people, and maybe it's a reflection on society as a whole, that we are becoming, if we're not already, just more selfish. And it's, as you said, you don't think about how it affects somebody else. It's just right. So you can vent whatever you want to vent, and you can do it anonymously on
make
Twitter.
Yourself feel better, tee off on some people, and then walk away and don't think about it again. And meanwhile, I really believe in the old saying that, be kind, because you never know what kind of a day someone else is having. I mean, there have been days when I've, withstood just horrific stuff and I've just sort of let it roll off my back. But there's other days when, for whatever reason, I'm just, I'm in a bad mood, or I'm feeling really self-conscious that day, or feeling like an imposter or whatever. And someone just says, the exact right thing to just really twist the knife in your back. And, and it just shatters your self-confidence. And I know that I should not allow that to happen. But at the same time, I am a very sensitive person who picks up on vibes from other people constantly and is always worried that someone's mad at me. And so when someone is mad at me or is like, I don't like you, that's like the worst thing for me. And I've, been trying to deal with it for years in therapy. And, at the end of the day, it's just who I am. And so I don't know. I was talking to another woman the other night in media, and she just said, "Oh, really? You think I'm stupid? Well, guess what? Now I think you're stupid." And that's the end of it for her. And I am so envious of that attitude. And I just wish that was where I could be.
Yeah. I think easier said than done to say, just let it off, especially if you're,
for sure.
if you're sensitive.
Yeah. And when it's 500 people telling you
Right.
that you suck, you start to be like, well, these people can't all be wrong. Maybe there's something to this. And you internalize a lot of it. So I think it can be really tough.
Mhm. I'll back up a little bit. You graduate from college, you don't
Mhm.
see any pathway, so you
Mhm.
decide to become a lawyer.
Yeah. Which I think is how most people become lawyers. You just don't know what else to do. So you're like, hey, I'll go to law school. So yeah, I did. And I was, I was a public defender, and social justice and racial justice has always been really interesting and important to me. So that was where I, concentrated my time and effort. But, not too long after that, the internet sort of exploded and blogs became a thing. And SB Nation had a Cubs baseball blog. So I started frequenting that site, and I was the only woman there. And, after a while, I started doing my own posts, because back then you could add your own posts to the sidebar, and started developing kind of a following. So I wound up having my own Cubs website that got a pretty big following, and that got picked up by the Chicago Tribune, who gave me the opportunity to come in-house and blog for the Tribune, which I did. And that was what got me out of law. And then eventually there was a sports talk radio station starting, and they said, we want you to be part of it. So I kind of fell ass backwards into it after giving up on it and thinking that it was never going to happen.
Yeah, we're all frauds, like George Costanza, and we
Right.
we all fall into things.
Right. We're all frauds. Right.
And tell me about that experience, because sports talk radio is an animal unto itself, right?
It really is. And it's very much a throwback. Like, I can't imagine another industry, and I'm sure there's STEM industries out there like this, but where, the only time I would see a woman was if I bumped into one in the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone, and coming from law, which is nowhere near perfect when it comes to, how it handles gender differences, but at least people in law know the rules. They know what you can and can't do overtly. Whereas sports talk radio was a lot like going into a frat house. There's naked women screen saved on the computers, and there's people drawing things on the board in the studio, and, guys watching porn. And it was just a very strange environment. And nobody seems to think it work. And nobody seems to think it's a problem, because there's all these guys that graduated college and went right into sports talk media, and they've never worked anywhere else. And they think this is normal. And having worked in another industry, I was like, this is insane. I can't believe people are doing this stuff at work.
What did you like about it?
Oh gosh, there's nothing I'd rather do in the world than talk about sports. So, just having that mic and having that connection with the audience. And, after I had a show for a while, we had a bunch of inside jokes, and, they would pop up on the text screen, and I had great producers that we just laugh and laugh and laugh during our show. And it was really fun. Most of the time, 90% of the time, it was really, really fun, but the 10% was bad.
So, I would guess that most of the audience respected the fact that you grew up a fan, you knew the game, and you could communicate it.
Yeah, I think that sports talk radio is just kind of a throwback to another time. And the demographic is one that is getting older and has more conservative views, I would say, than, people on Twitter, for example, or people on, social media. So there was definitely a crowd that did not appreciate me and me being there at all, and would say things like, I go to sports to get away from my wife. Why do I have to hear a woman's voice on here? And stuff like that. And there were times, for example, I was on the air when Colin Kaepernick took a knee the first time and talked about it on the air. And there were a bunch of people who did not appreciate my take on that. They didn't appreciate my take on domestic violence a lot of the time, or women's sports. And I think that I had to sort of prove myself to the audience in a way that men don't necessarily, because in the beginning, I felt like if I made a mistake, it was going to be because you're a woman. See, you don't know. See, you made a mistake. Whereas I'd hear guys make mistakes on there all the time. And I've heard since, and I talk about this in the book, that, Jessica Mendoza told me that she didn't sleep the night before Sunday Night Baseball the entire first year, because she was like, I'm the only woman in a booth, and if I make a mistake, it's going to be, that's it. No more women. So she was, it's something I think that all of us feel. Laura Oakman's talked about this as well. You're just not allowed to make a mistake. And so I'd see guys walk in, 15 minutes before their show starts and just sit down and start talking. Whereas I was there 2-3 hours ahead of time, taking notes and printing out pages and highlighting things so I could point to them, and just making sure that I really knew what I was talking about, because I knew I would not get away with it if I didn't.
Back to the book for a minute. What would, if you had a goal when you sat down to write it for your readership, what was it?
It was that it's not just a sports book, that this book is about issues that affect women across the country, around the world, the issues like equal pay and violence against women and sexual harassment and feeling like to be made less than in your industry is something that happens to women everywhere. And so it's not really a book about sports. It's a book about what it's like to be a woman in a male dominated field. And I think that can apply to, a lot of different women. So my biggest fear was that bookstores would take it and chuck it on the sports shelf next to like a biography of Mickey Mantle or something, which is, fine. I'd love to read a biography of Mickey Mantle, but that wasn't really what I was going for. And what I wanted people to take away from it is, not just in sports, but in STEM, in the music industry, in gaming industry, like there's a lot of women in all those fields combined. And this is what it's like for a lot of us. And I've had so many women who work in engineering and things like that say, I can't believe how relevant this is to my life. And that was what I was going for.
And how many million do you hope to sell?
Oh God, I don't even know. What's a good number?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
If one person read something I wrote, I'd be ecstatic.
Yeah, everyone's always asking me, how many have you sold? And when do you find I have no idea. Maybe that's something I should look into.
There you go.
Thanks.
So you're also writing and editing for Deadspin, which kind of died and then came back. And
yeah.
How did you get involved with?
When I lost my job, I think within the hour that I announced that I had lost my job, they contacted me and asked if I would be willing to go there. And first I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not going to that place. I know what they did to the other people there. But once I talked to the people working there, once I found out what the true story was, they didn't lay everyone off, it sounded like something I might be interested in. And we've taken a real bend towards social and racial justice. We write about it a lot. That's a really important issue. And, being in a place that lets me use my voice the way I want and doesn't, stop me from saying things, which is something that happened to me at the last couple of places I wrote, is sort of like, if that's how you feel and if you can back it up, then we'll back you. And I think that's a really important thing to have when you're writing.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about social, racial injustice and how we get to say there is a perfect place, which probably doesn't exist, but if it were to, how do we get there?
It's a great question, because one of the things we do in sports is work through our issues, right? I mean, whether we're talking about Jackie Robinson integrating America or integrating baseball before America was integrated, Muhammad Ali bringing the Vietnam War argument to everyone's living room, or Billie Jean King fighting for gender rights and LGBTQ rights, and the Black Lives Matter movement last summer. I mean, there's a million of these moments. And I think that we're having really important conversations in sports right now. The problem, we still as a country tend to shut down conversations we don't like. And so you have someone speaking out and, have someone saying, this is what it's like for me to be a Black woman in this country. And suddenly you have 1,000 people, trying to get her account shut down and screaming at her. And that's really unhelpful. So it's not going to happen on social media for sure. But I don't know what a perfect society looks like. I've never lived in one. I grew up thinking this country was a much different place, I think, than it turned out to be, because I only knew white people growing up. So having Black people in my lives and hearing their stories and hearing from other people of color and hearing from the LGBTQ community has changed my thinking radically. And, gosh, I don't know what it looks like to go to that place. I hope that sports will play a big part in it.
I think talking to one another rather than at one another is an important attribute. And this is my opinion. I don't think people take the time to have dialogue and then try to understand being in another person's shoes.
Yeah. And there are definitely moments where people have said things to me and I've sort of dug in my heels and been like, I am not a racist. How dare, kind of thing. And, and then later you start thinking about it and you're like, wow, I never thought about it from that point of view. And there's a lot of great media out there that is, that is helping inform people's opinions. I think the 1619 Project was hugely influential. No, it's hugely influential for me. So, I think it's going to come, hopefully we're moving everything forward via all different kinds of media. And I think that sports definitely has a role to play in that. And, we over at Deadspin are trying to make sure that sports is headed in the right direction too.
And, sports has, whether a designed effect or it's just because of the nature of sport. And I think I've told this story maybe on one of these seminars or panels before. I worked in local TV sports for 24 years, and you cover high school sports in neighborhoods that normally you would not go into. And I think what you learn is that we're all the same, that people are afraid of what they don't know. And I think the truth is, no matter what your skin color, you cut us open, we all bleed the same color, we're all the same inside. And sports is a way that can bring people together. There's the Amazon guy. There's the Amazon guy.
Yeah. Hello. There we go. My husband's got him.
There you go. Thanks, hon.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And, I remember when I was a law clerk, I was working for the Chicago Housing Authority. And I went regularly, a couple of occasions, into Cabrini Green, into the housing projects in Chicago, which are notoriously some of the worst in the nation. And all I knew of Cabrini Green at that time was what I'd heard about it from people, how horrible it was, and Candyman. That's what I knew about Cabrini Green. And, going in there, I was shocked to see how many regular, hardworking families were living in there and trying to make it, who were just like my family growing up. And I always, I have 2 kids, and I encourage them so much to travel and to meet different kinds of people and to go overseas and see how other people live and try to learn from other people's experience. And unfortunately, I think that is a place you get to a little bit later in life. But I hope that the generation coming up, who seems to have it together in so many different things, I hope that they will really be the ones to make a big leap forward.
I think perspective is important to have, and we don't all come by that at an early age.
Yeah, I agree.
I think, one of the most beneficial things to me is flying in an airplane at 37,000 feet, and you look out the window and you think, you know what, we're all kind of tiny specks out there.
Yeah, right.
And so,
I agree.
So to have this kind of anger and resentment to other people, to me, that's where it makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't have to love everybody, but at least try.
Yeah.
Understand. Would love to open it up now to everybody else who's on here, Adam and Kai and Ed and Danielle and Antoine. If you guys have any questions for Julie, just go ahead and pop your mic open and fire away, since we're a nice intimate group today. Danielle?
Hey, this is Danielle Williams. I have a question. When you look at what got you from where you were to where you are now, and the ability to have the confidence to write this book and make all this information public for public scrutiny, what do you think were sort of the top 3 things that helped you get there?
I'm really stubborn. I think that's the first thing. I think anyone with an ounce of sense would have stopped by now instead of dealing with a lot of the online abuse that I deal with. I was really lucky. I had someone reach out to me, a publisher reach out on Twitter and say, you should put this in a book. You shouldn't just be screaming into the void here on Twitter. You should put this stuff, down somewhere in an organized way so people can read it. I don't know that I necessarily had the confidence in my writing to do that at that point in time. So, that helped me tremendously and gave me a lot of confidence. I hate to say that all of this stuff comes from other people, but I had an agent and a publisher early on who really believed in the book, who really understood exactly where I wanted to go with it, understood that I didn't want it to be just a run-of-the-mill sports book. I wanted it to be about bigger issues. And, I think every writer needs a cheerleader. And they were. I mean, they kept telling me along the way that I was headed in the right direction. This is going to be a great book, just keep going. And, like I said, I'm a sensitive person who internalizes criticism. And there were plenty of times when I just didn't want to keep going. But, sometimes I think having those people around you to pick you up and dust you off and sort of push you back out there is what you really need.
I'll bet writing a book made you a better editor.
I hope so. You know what the worst part is? That when you do the audiobook, you're reading the book and it can't be, they send you a script and it can't be changed. Yet I'm finding typos. You know, I think I found 4 typos and I was like in a ball in the fetal position. I'm like, there were like 6 of us editing this. How can there still be typos? But yeah, alas, I guess that's common.
Yeah, that would drive me nuts.
Yeah, it was.
See, my problem is I'm a great speller and a horrible typist, because I learned by having to when I started writing for my local newspaper when I was a 15-year-old high school junior, and I still am a hunt and peck typist. So let that be a lesson. Anybody else with a question? Now is your time. Kai?
I actually do have a question. What are your thoughts about, are you familiar with Monica McNutt? I imagine you are.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about her on Around the Horn recently?
I haven't seen her yet on Around the Horn, but I heard she's been terrific. I have just missed the times that she's been on, so I haven't seen her yet. Have you seen her? How is she?
I haven't seen her very much just because of where I am, but from the little bit that I've seen, she's just been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah, I think the first appearance that she was on, she actually won.
Yeah, she's terrific. I love her voice. I love her take on sports. And, you know, in an industry where as hard as I have it as a white woman, Black women have it much harder. You know, I deal with the sexism that comes my way, but I don't have to deal with racism on top of it. So the more women we can get into high profile roles in this industry, and especially more Black women and women of color, I am all for it. And Monica, I think, is terrific. And I was so glad to see her get that opportunity and then to hear that she did such a terrific job.
Funny enough, I actually commentated on a game where she played against my university in the NCAA tournament.
Oh, really?
And yes, Maryland versus Georgetown, and Georgetown won in College Park.
How funny.
So,
yeah, that's
right.
great.
A little bit, just a little.
Just a little.
This was about 10 years ago.
Julia, what are your thoughts on the recent NCAA controversy with, you know, there was what, a dumbbell or 2 for the women's tournament,
and a pile of yoga mats, because that's what girls do. They do yoga. Yeah. I mean, it was ridiculous. It's kind of amazing that the NCAA just keeps falling on their face when it comes to women over and over and over again. And the worst part about it is that unless they are publicly shamed, and God bless Sedona Prince for putting that out there for everyone to see, they just don't care. And they'll fix it afterwards, but it's only after public pressure that they ever do anything. And I mean, this is not new with how they treat women's sports. This has been going on for years and years and years. So it's just remarkable to me that they don't sit down with who's ever in charge of the men's tournament ahead of time and say, all right, what do we have for the men? Let's make sure we have something for the women too. But they just don't. And I was just reading today that the not NCAA property movement wanted to reach out and talk with Mark Emmert, and he was willing to talk to the men's players, but not the women's players. So that's super.
And Nicole Auerbach, who is on the NSMA board and just won our National Sports Writer of the Year at age 31. What is
she's
thoughts
great.
on that?
She's terrific. I love Nicole.
And wrote the story about at least one AD or commissioner said there's no vision, we're floundering.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And I hesitate sometimes to criticize Mark Emmert because people think he's the one with all the power, because I think people misunderstand how the NCAA is run. It is not an independent overseer of college athletics. It's what the schools, what the school presidents want.
Right.
And he works at the pleasure of the president.
I agree, but I don't know what you could come up with to say, I'm going to meet with the men, but not the women. I mean, that to me is just kind of remarkable. Yeah, I mean, he is the figurehead. So he is the one that gets all the, all the
paid handsomely to be there.
Yes. So that was my next thing I was going to say. Yes, he is much like Roger Goodell. He is paid very well to have that job. I don't know. And it's kind of interesting because we saw the Supreme Court pretty much smack the NCAA's attorneys around yesterday. And seemed very dubious about their definition of amateurism. So we'll see if things change dramatically in the next few years.
I want to put a plug in for Jeffrey Kessler from my law firm, Winston and Strawn. So I was super proud to see him and listen to him standing up for the players and have an independent thought, which I don't recognize the ability to get paid and not be an independent thinker like the head of the NCAA. He may serve at the pleasure of the presidents, but he can't be so tone deaf and get paid what he does. It just
100%.
is remarkable to me.
Yeah, completely agree.
So on my screen, I'm surrounded by attorneys here. Julie on one side and Danielle on the other.
I'm in recovery, so
You're the smartest one of us all.
My husband and I are both in recovery, which makes the student loans just fantastic to still be paying when neither one of us is practicing law.
Now my train of thought just went not only derailed, but it went completely off the track.
I'm sorry.
Tipped over. Where was I going? How do we fix this NIL NCAA issue or the paid employee, not paid employee conundrum, I guess you could say.
The whole thing about allowing students to use the NIL is that, and get paid for it, is that then the schools don't have to pay them, right? I mean, if you just allow that, then that money comes in from endorsements or being able to monetize your social media, however you can do it. That to me is a no-brainer, because I think otherwise schools are going to wind up having to do something. I think that, Northwestern players trying to unionize was ahead of its time. I think that is coming. I feel like I hear more and more people say all the time, unpaid teenagers, when talking about, college athletes. So to me, that's just the easiest thing in the world for them to do, but they're pretty stubborn.
How do you weigh that against the cost or the value of a college scholarship, the stipend they get, the best in athletic training and tutoring and meals, nutrition that they get?
For me, it's different because they're bringing money into the university. And, when you have coaches making $9-10 million a year, and then the players are not getting anything. There was a really famous story when I was in college about Calbert Cheaney being at the mall in Bloomington and seeing his jersey hanging there and wanting, and the jersey was being sold for like $150 or something like that. And he didn't have enough money in his pocket to go to Chick-fil-A to get, a sandwich. So to me, it's if they weren't bringing in so much money for the university, if they weren't bringing in $700 million or whatever the NCAA lost last year without the tournament. I mean, I remember, earlier last year in 2020 in the summer, when they laid off or furloughed like 700 people at NCAA headquarters. And I was like, how are there 700 people dependent on kids playing sports for their careers? Like, that just seems crazy to me.
It is crazy. I mean, we've gotten to a point that it's nuts. It's not just crazy. My feeling is that you're not printing more money. It's got to come from the pot that's there, not the NIL. But if you're going to pay players somehow, and that would require people who are making that money now to give some of it up.
Yeah, like the coaches. I'd be fine with
the
that.
Coaches and the athletic staff. But on the other hand, you as a fan of the Hoosiers, you want the best coach. Mike Woodson's your best option. You want the best coach because you want him to be better than Purdue's coach.
That is correct.
And you want and you want him to recruit the best players. So you want him to have the best facilities.
Yep.
And a private jet so he can go get these guys. And that costs money.
Yeah. And I think the hope is that, if they don't go the NIL route, and if they do wind up having to pay from money that the schools have, that the salaries for coaches go down sort of across the board. And then, of course, it becomes boosters who are so important, because it's like, we can't pay this, but our boosters will pay it. And then I think it's kind of a free for all, which is why I think the NIL is the best solution for everybody.
And here's the bottom line for me. Try it, and either you say, okay, we're going to try this for 3 years and see how it works. And at the end of 3 years, okay, it didn't work. We're going to go try something else. We're going to tweak it. And you'll constantly be trying to tweak it to get it right or correct and try. And that's the thing, you can even say that in government. Why don't we try this? Okay, nobody wants to pay more taxes, but maybe we need to do it for 2 years to build up the infrastructure to get it right. I think that's an avenue that people should understand. And even if it's not your way of thinking, say, you know what, I'm going to meet you halfway and I'm going to try it for a couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's worth it. And I think they're going to have to do something. They can't remain the way things are right now. I'm also totally good with getting rid of one and done, letting guys go right to the NBA and having lesser players in college. That's fine with me too. Like, I don't expect to see NBA level college basketball when I turn on the TV.
Well, my personal opinion, college basketball has become so much like the NBA. It is becoming, again, in my opinion, almost as unwatchable as the NBA. I mean, I grew up a huge NBA fan. I grew, my wonder years were when the Celtics, I grew up an hour outside of Boston, and the Celtics were winning championships in the late 60s, 70s. When I was first in TV, I was covering the Celtics, Lakers, Showtime finals battles in the mid 80s and loved it. And now I watched a game the other day. It was the Charlotte Hornets and the Phoenix Suns, because I know Chris Paul because I covered him when he was at Wade. And I was like, I don't enjoy watching this. And
I think what makes the NBA fun is the fact that you know who's got beef with who, and the things that happen on the court and off the court are hilarious. And, and I think they do a great job of letting the fans market the product for them. Letting them use GIFs and change things and, in a way that no other sport has really figured out how valuable that is.
Yeah, that goes way back to owners not wanting their baseball games on TV back in when it first started, because they thought it would take
away their hockey games
from the gates.
Right.
Favorite sport is what?
Soccer.
Soccer.
I grew up playing soccer. I love playing it. I love watching it. I'm also a huge baseball fan, so I'm, it's opening day, and I love the Chicago Bears. Those are my three great loves.
So you and I could do a good talk show, because I did a sports commentary for the NPR station here a couple of years ago, saying, it's not that I hate soccer, it's just that I don't care. I tried for 20 years, and I just you can only watch so many things.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think everybody has their couple that they're really into.
Yeah. Who do you like for sports talk? What sports talk people do you like?
Oh gosh. It's a really good question. I haven't listened to sports talk since I lost my job. I literally have not listened to it. And I used to listen all day long. I used to really love Terry Boers when he was on my station with Dan Bernstein. I grew up listening to Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick on Sports Center, which was the appointment TV when I was in college. So I still like Dan Patrick a lot.
You should have been on our trivia contest last night. Dan joined us.
Yeah, I honestly, I listen to more political talk than I do and news talk than I do sports talk these days.
And the reason I asked, one of the thoughts that popped into my head when I was talking about you can only watch so much, and this is probably, in fact, I will tell you exactly. You'll appreciate this. I heard this. I did a panel at the Women's Final Four in Indianapolis in maybe 2000. When was it? 10 or 11? It was in Indy. 2010 or 11. And then the next day I drove down to Bloomington to see if we could start a student chapter at IU. And I met with a bunch of students. And when I was driving and when I left campus and I was driving back from Bloomington to 65 to head back this way, I was listening to Colin Cowherd, who said, and he was talking about why the NBA at that point had lost popularity. He said, for men, you grow up and you know everything about sports when you're in high school and college because you have the time to do it. You get married, you have kids, you have a job, all of a sudden that time gets compressed and you have to, his phrase was, you have to cull from your sports tree. And I said, what? That's something that, makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And also I will say that, a lot of guys at that level are getting what they know from their producers. You know, and I remember listening to sports talk radio and just thinking like, God, I could never do this. These guys know everything. And then realizing that, you know, once you sit there, your producer is constantly putting stats on the screen and telling you all these things to sort of bolster your argument. So I guess the curtain has been pulled back on that for me a little bit. And, and I'm not so interested anymore. But, you know, I also think it coincided with a global pandemic and with a really important election, the most, you know, the biggest one in my lifetime. And so it just sort of, when I didn't have to be in the minutia of it every single day, because I had to be ready to talk about whatever people wanted to talk about at night, then my world sort of broadened. And, you know, now I catch all the big stuff and I'm on Twitter all the time. So I can still stay up to breast with the things that are going to be jokes and memes in the years going forward. But I'm not sort of submerged in it like I was for 6 years when I was doing sports talk radio.
And speaking of being on Twitter all the time, I think I noticed one right before we came on at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock your time. And I was going to ask you what it meant.
Okay.
It was no. What was it?
Oh, no more 3-man booths. Because the Marquee station here in Chicago. So Len Casper left our beloved Cubs and went to the South Side, which is sort of like Benedict Arnold, you know, throwing it all in with the British. And
but he's doing radio for the White Sox?
He's doing radio.
And Jason's doing TV.
Yes, he's doing radio, and he is a terrific broadcaster. And I don't blame him. I mean, I am a person who loves radio as well. I think if you know, radio people really, really like radio, and he's one of those people. So Marquee Sports Network keeps doing this thing where they bring in a third person in and out of the booth. And we were hoping they'd get rid of it this year because they are truly terrible. That is where Mark Grace came in and started calling his ex-wife names, which is actually the only time it's ever been interesting. And now they're shooting Ryan Dempster in and out, and he's doing his Harry Carey impression. And I'm just sitting here like, oh my God, please no more.
No.
It's really bad.
So have you asked our boy Pat Hughes to do a few innings of a Cubs game yet?
To do a few innings. I mean, he's doing the radio. He's doing the radio.
But have you not asked him? It's like, you know, feed me a game or two.
Oh gosh, you know, they wouldn't even let me do Cubs post game when I was at the station, which was, you know, out of the booth and back on the radio because, you know, I had been critical of the Cubs president of business operations in the past, and he makes those decisions, and he didn't want me anywhere near post game. So there is no way I'm ever getting to call a Cubs game as long as he's involved in this organization.
And he's still there, I take it.
He is still there.
Kai, did you have another question?
No, I did not.
Okay, I didn't know.
I just realized I was not muted.
Gotcha. Yes, we heard you laughing. That's okay.
That was good. That's how I know my jokes are landing.
That's right. And the dog, how many dogs do you have?
I have 2.
What kind?
I have a little Jack Russell Maltese mix, and I have a Rhodesian Ridgeback. Oh. And the little tiny white one runs this entire household.
So I've noticed that I have a red-bone coonhound, at least according to the vet, that resembles a Ridgeback a little bit. Right. But I think the Ridgebacks are a little bigger.
Well, we think she is Ridgeback and Vizsla, but you know, is when they come from a shelter, you never know for sure. And she has a ridge, but it faces the wrong way. So she's like a
ridge
defective.
Front, not a ridge back.
She's like a defective Ridgeback.
Come for the sports talk, stay for the dog talk.
I was doing a show the other night on live TV, and my dog was laying behind me. And then he gets up, looks at the camera, yawns, and walks away. And I could hear my husband downstairs laughing because it was on TV it was live. And I'm like, what is going on? And when I got off, my whole Twitter timeline was just going crazy about the dog.
I see your ring light reflection in your glasses, by the way.
Yeah, that's a thing too. Yeah.
I had to take my glasses off last night because I had to.
You know, I know you can see it, and I've noticed that on MSNBC, I can see everybody's ring light reflection in their glasses. So I just stopped caring. I'm like, if it's good enough for, you know, freaking Brian Williams, then it's fine for me.
Yeah, that's my thing. I can see from here to here, so I don't need my glasses. Now it's, of course, you can see the afternoon sun is right here. Right. So I should get the ring light on to fill, but whatever. I don't want to waste any more of your time. Julie, thank you very much. I enjoyed this tremendously. Best of luck with the book. Again,
Thank you.
I can't wait to read it. I might send it to you so you can autograph it. We'll
I would be happy to do
library.
Or send you a book plate.
And I will as soon as we know, we're definitely doing our awards weekend in July. And if we are indeed doing our sports book festival, expect an invitation.
I would love that. Thank you so much to everyone who showed up. It was great to talk to you guys.